Okay, good morning, students. I keep saying good morning. I'm so used to working in the morning, not in the evenings, but good evening. Thank you for joining the lecture for today. My name is Nosipho Gumede. I will introduce myself briefly, but I just want to make sure that we are okay on the ground rules before I even start saying anything. So please ensure that your mic is kept on mute. At least now I can see what's going on, but once I start presenting, I may not be able to see where the noise is coming from. And so it might make it difficult for me to mute. So please just keep your mic on mute, also in the interest of other students. It is an interactive class. I do expect that we interact and we talk. The reason why we're here is so we can understand where you are facing problems while you go through your auditing material. So please feel free to engage with me. And I prefer that you raise your hand when you want to interact with me, and I'll be able to then acknowledge you and we can keep the dialogue going. If you have any other questions and you don't feel like talking, which I don't actually recommend, I would really like for you guys to engage with me. You're more than welcome to also drop a question, whatever, comment on the chat. I'll take breaks every now and then and just accommodate the chat. And then, yeah, I think that's about it. I would also like to appeal that you have your standard ready. So by your standard, I mean this specific book here. So you're not going to be able to see it. Yeah, but it's basically the SAICA Handbook Volume 2B, the one that has Companies Act, CIPC, King 5. I think it will be helpful if you just have it handy with you where you've highlighted. Obviously, the expectation is that you're coming into this class with some sort of background knowledge. You're not going to be starting here. You've already done the work. You've already gone through your learning units. You've already gone through the standard itself, the ISAs. You've also already gone through, any additional notes from prior year, or even the textbook in areas where you expect that you may not have full view of what's going on. Okay, so we're going to start. So I'll introduce myself again. My name is Nosipho Gumede, and I will be taking you guys through the material for test 1. So essentially, we'll be doing Companies Act, King 5. We'll look at the CPC as well as the APA. And I don't know if I've mentioned Companies Act already. So essentially everything that you would have gone through as part of the first learning units for the year. And obviously, is the sound really low? Is it
Yes,
really
we
low?
could. Yes.
Let me try this.
No, you're back now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Please just let me know if there's any other technical glitches. I think I will turn off my video as we proceed, just so I don't mess around with the you guys seeing my screen. I'll turn it on when I need to. But yeah, I was introducing myself. I'll be taking you for test 1. I've been at UNISA for 3 years, NCTA 2 years in undergrad. So I come with a lot of experience. I am a chartered accountant. That's obvious. All your lecturers are chartered accountants. Qualified in 2018. I'm a student like you. I'm pursuing my PhD, and I've got experience from audits. I work for one of the big 5 audit firms. I have industry experience as well. So I think you're in good hands, I think, but we'll see. Please engage me. I really do welcome any questions, any comments. I just want it to be an engaging lecture so that we understand where we are going wrong. I'm going to share my screen now. You let me know once you can see it. Oh. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool. I'm going to turn off my video. I'll switch it on as and when I need to emphasize on something. Okay. All right. So, like I said, I really do think that coming into this lecture, you would have already gone through the material. I'm really just here to give you, to consolidate everything to make it make sense. I'm here to identify the gaps. I'm here to help you with structuring your answers when you respond, but I'm really not here to teach you the content. Remember, this is content that you would have covered from third year. Maybe sometimes in some areas you may find that you actually have covered this in second year. But really my point today is to structure your thoughts. And, sometimes when we read or go through material, we may be, overwhelmed and the information may be all over the place. So today I want to just emphasize that look out for the structures, look out for exam technique, look out for, the important things that I'll be pointing out. And I think you should be fine. I'm hoping that at least you would have attempted the self-assessment questions as well as some of the questions that would have been in your question bank, so that at least you get a feel of how the questions are answered. The structure of today, like I said, we're going to be covering high level the principles that I think you guys should know. I'm going to be going deep on exam technique so that tomorrow when we do the question, we are fine in terms of covering the fundamentals. Just to repeat, I believe an announcement has already gone out as well. So tomorrow we'll be doing test 1 from last year. It's the Novatech question, and you'll see it's got a March 2025 year end. So that's the one that we'll be doing and spending time on tomorrow. Okay, so I want to start the engagement by just gauging from you guys. What do you guys think we have to learn the sections that we are learning? Like, why is it important for us to even learn these sections? Why do you guys think this is important for us to go through the material, being the CPC, the APA, the King Code, as well as the Companies Act? Why is this important? Tabiso?
Sorry, ma'am. Please can you repeat what you said at the
question.
beginning? Not the question. I saw you holding up the auditing standard, but I had network problems.
I was asking you if you can just have it handy because we're going to go through it together during the sections that I'm going to need you to just refer to them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, who wants to take that? Nonjebo?
Thank you, ma'am. So I think it is very important for us to start with these topics or to study these topics because as aspiring chartered accountants, we have to know what is expected of us when we are in the field in terms of ethics. We have to know how to conduct ourselves, and also we have to know how we are expected to deal with our clients. So I think that's the main thing here.
100%. I agree with you. That's correct. Desmond, do you want to take it?
Online. I did type in the chat box. I think it is because it deals with compliance with the relevant laws and regulations.
Okay. And compliance and so what?
So in order to comply, you need to know the required laws and regulations. So it's more for us, from the student body or then the practitioners in the field.
Yes.
It enables them to be aware of what needs to be done. So, for example, with your Companies Act, there are companies that are registered that need to comply with
Yes.
certain sections of the Act, and with the audit APA.
Yeah.
It's for the audit professionals and stuff. So I think it's more on compliance.
Okay. That's spot on, guys. Thank you. I'm going to take more hands, but I just want to confirm, is everyone hearing me clearly? Because I'm seeing comments that seem that others aren't hearing me correctly. Well, are you guys hearing me well? Is it? Okay, cool.
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear you.
So
you're
Khotswane,
hearing
maybe
me just
just check
fine.
your, okay, Khotswane, please can you just check maybe your devices is the one that's performing. Okay, I'm gonna take Ms. Ndwandwe and then I'll hold Siviwe and Jabulo to my next question. Hopefully you guys know the answer. Don't be scared to raise your hands now. Okay, Ms. Ndwandwe, go ahead.
Am I audible? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so as my fellow CTA Level 2 students have mentioned, I just want to add on that also it's to develop us to act from a place of integrity and independence, but also taking into account the statutory requirements of the various legislations. Yeah.
Okay.
In applying, in gathering evidence, also in assessing risk, and as part of like the whole being an auditor package. Yeah.
Yeah. 100% spot on. Okay, thank you for that. I want to address the questions. Siviwe, you wanted to ask a question. You may go ahead and ask a question.
Evening, ma'am.
Yes.
So I went on the additional resources. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure if this was done on purpose, but under additional resources, so the 2024 and 2025 test uploaded, I think it was for CTA level 1 because the code is AUE 4861.
The one that's uploaded on Myonisa.
Yes, under additional resources, Learning Unit 1 to Learning Unit 5. So it has the lecture 1 slides, it has past test 5 paper 1,
And
and
then it
then
says 4861. Okay, I'll have a
yes,
look at that.
22. Thank you.
Okay, I'll have a look at that and confirm via announcement. If that's the case, I doubt it though. I thought the instruction was clear, but I'll have a look at that and confirm for you.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'm not sure what the fuss is with my headphones, guys. I got enough confirmation that everyone can hear me. So can I please go on with your permission? Can I go on with my headphones? For me to block the noise, the background noise is more important because my kids are in the background. I don't want you guys to get distracted. Okay, cool. All right. So that's correct, guys. Everything that you've said is 100% correct. We need to learn about the laws, rules, regulations that govern us so that we know how to conduct ourselves as CAs, whether in business or in public practice. So I think that you always need to look at it with this view in mind that, you know, it's not just a CPC and it's not just a bunch of threats and fundamental principles. It's there to govern your conduct one day when you go into practice. And if you look at it like that, you may just unlock, different ways of approaching questions. And that's why I wanted to just emphasize on that. And the second question I have is, what material will I use to complement my knowledge? This one is obvious because I've already said. You already have the material. It's all these standards. So for instance, this SAICA Student Handbook 2025-2026, Volume 2B, it's all the material you need to answer questions. So if you have not spent time with this, if you haven't flagged it enough for you to know what's where, then I just want to remind you that you need to do that because it will help you in terms of, you know, the information on the day of the test or even exam or even later on when you do your board exams. And does it end here? Where else can this knowledge be applied? Well, we're here because we are training you to become a chartered accountant who will one day become a CFO, a CEO, you name it. So we don't just want you to learn rules of how we expect CAs to conduct themselves, but we also want you to be practical and apply these one day when you get into practice. That's why it's important. So it's actually not about test one, but it's about what happens one day when you get in the field. Will you be able to conduct yourself in a manner that is acceptable and prioritizes ethical behavior? Remember, you already have the knowledge. The point of this lecture is to bring the structure, to bring structure to your thinking through practical application. So today we're focusing on the structure of thinking. Tomorrow will then be more focused on the practical application. Okay, so if you've been to any of my lectures, whether it's level 1 or level 2, you'll know that I don't start a lecture without presenting the slide. And the reason why I do this is because I find that often auditing students forget about the whole objective of why we are doing auditing. And many students still struggle to integrate these different parts that we do in auditing and make them make sense. And so today, I want to present this to you. Maybe some of you are seeing this for the first time, but please come back to the slide when you do the rest of the module of the sections within this module. So today the focus is going to be on number 1. And what is number 1 about? It's about King principles, it's about Companies Act, business ethics, as well as CPC. right? And I'm sure you're wondering, how does this even integrate to the whole auditing process? Well, it all starts with the companies, or the very same companies that employ us, which we have interest in. So you can think of a company, say maybe it can be a state-owned company, it can be an Eskom, it can be a hospital, it can be a Netcare, it can be a Google, it can be Instagram, it can be whatever company you are thinking of. This company has got laws and regulations that govern it. And in this company, there's probably some CAs that work in here. And, you know, the company as a whole needs to conduct business in a manner that is ethical. And as part of the Companies Act, if it's within the jurisdictions of South Africa, it is required to have its financial statements either audited or independently reviewed. Let's assume audited because the companies I've given examples of are mostly big and listed. So that's the trigger then that allows us to then think about the auditor. I'll come back to the auditor as I've labeled him number 3. But when you think about this company, this is a factory. Let's just assume that this is a cement factory. In this cement factory, there are processes, there are business cycles and processes that are happening to actually get something from a raw material all the way to translated cash that comes into the bank after the product has actually been sold. These business cycles include anything to do with production, inventory, it includes salaries and wages, it includes accounts receivables, accounts payable, all of those we call business cycles, and you know these from undergrad, right? Or even CTA 1. So these business cycles just speak to the function, the core operational function of the enterprise, and obviously how we as accountants reflect those business cycles is by applying IFRS and all other maybe relevant applicable frameworks. But let's just stick to IFRS for now. So accountants translate what's happening in the business by utilizing IFRS. Then going back to number 3 here, which is this this auditor who was triggered by you know, a Companies Act that says that any company that is making revenue that is in excess of a certain amount needs to be audited. And then this is what then leads to the introduction of this auditing cycle, which is the core of this module. And I'm not saying these others are not important, but essentially they all feed into the actual auditing cycle. So it starts with engagement acceptance, which you are yet going to do in the next class. You'll be covering this. It goes to planning, then you do test of controls, then you do substantive procedures, you do completion, and then eventually you do the audit report, which is the actual piece of paper that must accompany the financial statements to confirm that indeed the financial statements are prepared in a manner that represents the actuality of what's happening in the business. So that's why then this becomes the core of what we do. And obviously all of this is embedded directly or indirectly into the process. The APA, you know, the auditor, you know, is governed by the APA, as well as sections of the Companies Act, as well as business ethics in general. As a matter of fact, business ethics apply to every stakeholder that's involved in this process or even outside of the process. Anyone is obliged to comply to some sort of business ethics. And then obviously, the auditor is also a CA in public practice, depending on whether or not your understanding of the CPC is now affirmed. So that's just the audit process. Is there any question? Are there any questions around the audit process? I see 2 hands that are still up. Ms. Ndwandwe, is that a hand?
Oh, sorry, it's a legacy hand. Let me try
Okay.
and.
Njabulo, is that a hand?
No, I was trying to respond to the first question, and then you said you were gonna come back to us.
Okay, cool. What do you think of the audit of the audit cycle? Does it make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Actually, it
Okay.
does.
Perfect. All right. So let's continue then, guys. We are going to start with the CPC. I have a lot of slides and hopefully we'll get through it. I'm just cognizant of time, but hopefully we'll get through it. Remember, we're not covering the base, but we are just, you know, looking at key things that I think are important for your attention. Okay, so then we start with the Code of Professional Conduct, right? The Code of Professional Conduct, as you know it, is separated into different parts, different segments. You have the bottom part here, which essentially deals with the fundamental principle. And this is applicable to all professional accountants. Who can tell me, according to the code, what constitutes professional accountants? What makes up a professional accountant? Njabula, I think that's a legacy hand. Let's go to Totlisang.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
A professional accountant, we have a professional accountant in public practice, which is normally your auditors, like the people that go and externally audit a company. And we have professional accountants in business, which are your CEO, CFO, so on and so forth.
Okay, that's 100% correct. I guess I didn't ask my question well. I don't know. Yes, that's what I wanted to ask. Someone, Saipa though. I wanted to ask, what kind of accountants are obliged to comply to the CPC? That's what I wanted to ask. Let's take a hand from Marvelous.
Hi, ma'am. It's CAs, Qualified Chartered Accountants.
Okay, that's one. Anything else? Number two, who's number two? Who's number two? Khomoto.
And registered auditors.
Not really. And I'll get to why I'm saying that. Yeah, not really. I'll get to why I'm saying that. Okay, I'll skip Njabulu because I just spoke to him now. Jacobus, please come through.
I would say it's anyone, because this is the SAICA CPC. I would say it's anyone registered with SAICA. So that would be your AGAs, it would be your accounting technicians, it would be your chartered accountants, but it would also be somebody under a training contract, a SAICA training contract.
100%. You've actually summed up everything. I have a list here myself. So the AGAs actually stands for Associate General Accountants, you have Chartered Accountants, you have your trainee accountants as well, your accounting technicians, all of that. If you didn't know that, go back to your CPC and revise it. I can't remember who answered that, but essentially they were going ahead because we are still going to cover that. You can see, and I was saying that part one then covers the fundamental principles, right? So this is applicable to anyone, as we've just mentioned, including trainee accountants. And then the parts are split into, and then there's part two, right? Part two focuses mostly in professional accountants in business. And then part three will then focus in professional accountants in public practice. And I want us to actually go through the definition together. So please get your standards ready and go to the definitions of the CPC so that we can go through it in detail and elaborate so that you can see what we mean by the difference between these two. And then you have certain parts of part two that are also applicable to professional accountants in public practice. And then part four is mostly applicable also to professional accountants in public practice. It's just split into two, that being, engagements that are independent audit and review engagements versus independent in relation to other assurance engagements that are not audit or reviews. So this is essentially the building block of your CPC. If you get this right and you flag it well, you'll never get confused. And it's important to know which part you are at in the CPC. How you know that is by evaluating the role of the person in the scenario. It's important to know that because there's some parts that seem similar, but they're actually different. So you must always know and flag and highlight the differences for yourself even, so that when you get that in a question, it's quite clear. Okay, so here we are. Here are the key definitions. And I want us to then go through them from our standard. By show of hands, I don't know how we're going to do this actually. Okay, maybe you can give me a thumbs up. Who's got their standards ready? Thumbs up. Is it only one person? Okay, cool. I'm seeing quite a few people. Okay, so Zenkosi, are you there? Maybe I shouldn't pick on her, shame. Samu, your hand is up.
I'm here.
Samu? Samu?
My apologies, it was a mistake, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Sipo, your hand is up, but I also want to give you a task for us. Do you mind reading the definition of professional accountants in business for us, as seen on your CPC? Okay, some people are disappearing, but I'd actually like some engagement on this one for a specific reason. If anyone is willing, Zolani, are you willing? You can please just go through the definition of professional accountants in business for us so we can all understand and go through it together as a group.
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. A professional accountant refers to an individual professional accountant in business, and to professional accountants in public practice and their
Are you
firms.
reading this? Are you reading this from the standard, the definition from the actual CPC?
Correct.
Okay, you may go ahead and read it.
So you want a professional accountant in business or just a professional accountant?
Yes, professional accountant in business.
Okay. It's a professional accountant working in areas such as commerce, industry, service, the public sector, education, the not-for-profit sector, or in regulatory or professional bodies who might be an employee, contractor, partner, executive or non-executive, owner, or volunteer.
Okay, right. I hope everyone has already gotten that highlighted, because I don't expect there to be a confusion with regards to this, because it's actually in the definition. Anyone else to read the professional accountant in public practice, then professional accounting, professional services, sorry. So let's read the definition of the professional accountant in public practice together. I think I'll go for Humuto. You can then read the professional accountant in public practice definition for us.
A professional accountant, irrespective of functional classification in a firm that provides professional services.
Yes. You see that what you've skipped there in brackets, it says irrespective of functional classification, for example, audit, tax, or consulting. That's actually quite important, because it sort of gives you an idea of the areas in which the professional accounting in public practice normally operates. So that's actually important. Then I'd like you guys to highlight that as well. But yes, you're 100% correct. Also note that this is a person in the definition, but it could also be a firm. And that's what the latter part that's in italics is actually saying. Okay, now can we please read, no, let me do this reading. I want us to then go through the professional services, right? Because that's also embedded in the actual definition of both. And it says professional activities performed for clients. These include, but are not limited to, the following. So it's audit, review, other assurance and related services, such as financial statements and financial statement audits and reviews, preparation of financial statements, accounting services, company statutory services, and management consulting and advisory. Those are the ones that I've just picked for now. So I think that if students struggle with making the distinction between the two, always read the definition of professional accountant in public practice aligned with the professional services, because that's actually just direct explanation of what it is. And like I said, the area there that's in brackets also clarifies it for you and makes it clear in terms of what you should be looking out for. So we're talking of things like audit, taxation, as well as consulting in relation to the work that we do. If we're bringing this to everyday world as you know it right now, it would actually be anything that has to do with your four majors, right? So you have financial accounting, you have auditing, you have MENEC, and you have taxation. So that's the core of what you do, and hence that's why it's then called professional services, because that's the core of your training. That also means that if you get, for instance, a managing director who is a managing director for a taxation firm, they've moved away from the core. They no longer do the big four. So as a matter of fact, they are a professional accountant in business, because their daily functions don't involve the core, which is the big four. So I think that I've had a number of queries from students via email, and they were asking about the self-assessment question in your learning units. I think it's learning unit 1. And there, again, the distinction was that the person who was being described was actually a managing director of, a professional services firm. But by virtue of the type of activities that they were doing, their task on a day-to-day, did not form part of the core of what a chartered accountant does, and hence they were described as a professional accountant in business. Does that make sense? Can I take hands on this? Zenkosi, is that a hand? Zenkosi, is that a hand?
Hi, apologies. No, sorry, apologies. It was a hand when you called my name before.
Okay, no worries. Jessica?
Hi, ma'am. I just wanted you to repeat what you said.
Okay, which part though?
With regards to the professional accountant.
Okay.
The last part when you were explaining.
Okay, the last part. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to say there, Jessica, is that what actually defines a professional accountant in business versus a professional accountant in public practice, you can almost deduce it to the 4 majors, which we normally as CAs get involved in. So that being accounting, taxation, management accountant, as well as auditing, right? So if the person and the duties of the person in the workplace involve these core things, then you can sort of, based on the definition we've just read, you can sort of deduce that they are actually a professional accountant in public practice. However, when the duties of the person in question have moved away from the core of what a chartered accountant is known to do, that's when you have a professional accountant in business. For instance, you could have myself, who is a lecturer at a university, and that is already mentioned in the definition itself. It does say that education, right? Though I'm teaching, but I've actually moved away from the core. I'm not doing financial statements, or I'm not an audit as per definition that's defined. So therefore, you can deduce that I'm a professional accountant in a business. So, however, I need you guys to familiarize with yourselves with the actual definition, highlight it, understand it. When you get confused, come back here and apply yourself. You'll see that over time it actually becomes easier to understand. Is that clear? Is that clear, Jess?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Thank
you.
Tamogelo, is that a question?
No, sorry. I just wanted to say that professional accountant in practice for me, I always just link it to firm. So it's linked to a firm. It could be a tax firm. It could be an auditing firm. And then in business, it means you are an employee of that company. So it could be a bank. If they say an internal auditor in that business, that means you are a professional accountant in business.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would
so
I
you
would
could be
I
a
would
manager
I
and
would
stuff.
refine it and say a firm that produces the core activities.
Yes.
Because if you want to say that, you could also say that I work for a firm, right? UNISA is some sort of a firm, right? So I would say a firm that does the core activities. Then I understand. I fully agree with you. Well done for that. Ngali, I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I just wanted to ask. So you're saying that if you're a managing director, let's say in an audit firm, then you would have to comply with the requirements for a professional accountant in business.
Yeah. So because your functions have now deviated from, the functions that are now described as part of what makes up professional services in terms of your scope of work, like what you do on a day-to-day, it actually has nothing to do with what has actually been defined as professional services. Because when you look at these, like I'm saying, it boils down to audit, to review, to preparation of financial statements, accounting services. So because your core has deviated from that, you are then a professional accountant in business. Thank you. Desmond, is that a hand? I'm seeing more hands. I really like the engagement.
Yes, it is. I think I'm just going to ask also then on the distinction between CA and business and CA and public practice. So we mentioned audit, tax, and consulting, right? So say you're an MD, Maybe if you can also repeat the example that you gave, MD.
Okay, what does an
executive.
MD do? What do you think the scope of work of an MD is? A
It's a
managing director. What do they
managing
do?
director. Managing director, they're actually managing the day-to-day operations of the business. But then to go to my question is to say, consulting, for example, if you're an MD or maybe a manager at Absa Bank or you're doing consulting, is that not part of a public practice?
Consulting on what? It actually matters. The what matters.
Consulting
Because
on financial services. Consulting
think about
on,
this. While I won't answer you, you'll give me the answer, right? So you can then go back to answer yourself, read the definition of professional services, and let me know if the consulting that you have in mind forms part of any of those activities that are listed there. The definition of professional services.
I don't actually have my standard at hand,
You're gonna get in
sorry.
trouble with me.
Apologies.
Okay, but then you can actually Google this, right? You can Google it somewhere and just read the professional services definition. It's all in there. So if the consulting is part of the services that are listed there, then rightfully so, it should be in public practice. But if it's not, then it's in business.
Yes.
It boils down to the core activities.
Core activity. No, happy. I'll just then go back to the standard and I'll revert. Thanks.
Noted. Thanks. Fanelo.
Hi, Nosipho.
Hi.
So just like to have a follow-up question. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So a follow-up question on the grounds which we have just established, and then given that the distinctions between the two parts, between part 1 and part 3, between part 2 and part 3, how would this distinction actually differ in structuring our solution in assessments?
Okay, so remember I said that this distinction is important because when you read the scenario, you already know if there's parties in the scenario that are affected by part 2 of the CPC, you must be able to identify that. Also, rightfully so, when you see there's auditors involved, already you know which parts are applicable. So I'm not trying to create a situation whereby each and every scenario will distinctly have only part 2 or even only part 3. No, it's on you to identify the roles and make the distinction to say, okay, this is part 2 and therefore these parts will be applicable versus this is part 3, they're an audit firm, they're conducting audit work and therefore part 3 will be applicable. So you need to read and understand and assess based on the scenario what the roles of the people are. Is that clear, Mfanelo?
Yes, clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sure. Your ex. Yeah, ex.
Hi, Nosipho.
Hi.
Yes. So Nosipho, yes, I see that someone also had a similar question, like and so like I hope by asking my question they are also addressed. Yes, Nosipho, in a situation of CAPC and like the parts that are
okay, just hold on for me, X. Can I ask you guys to please mute because I'm struggling to hear X. I can't hear what he's saying. You can go ahead. Let's try again.
It's fine. Like I just changed my mic now, so can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you much better.
Okay. Yes. So yes, I was saying that like I hope I can address someone else's question because I saw it was on the chat. So the question is, if ever now like I'm a professional accountant who's like from an audit firm, I understand already, or like I'm a professional accountant in public practice. So however, if ever let's say in a scenario like the person whom I'm dealing with as a partner, let's say as an audit firm, we are auditing KPMG. And then let's say me as a partner from my auditing firm, like there are threads which are linked to the partner of that audit firm that we are auditing. So are we both professional accountants in practice because of we are both working for professional firms, or is it because of the person whom we are auditing as a partner in the business? Yes.
Okay, let me clarify something. Are we talking about now the firms or are we talking about individuals?
Individuals.
Okay, so the individual from the auditing firm, is the partner, right? Who's the individual on the other side?
I, as an auditor, I'm also like a partner at my audit firm.
Okay, so but why would you two be engaging? Why would a partner be engaging with a partner on the client side? It's usually the audit firm audits the accounting department, right? So the people that work in the accounting department of, for instance, KPMG are actually not auditors. They are like professional accountants in business because they are involved in, you know, the finance, running of the finance department. So you actually never really get you actually never get a scenario like that. Partner to partner, no, it doesn't work. It's always partner to the accounting division, the people that are responsible for preparing the financials and so on and so forth. Again, it boils down to the roles of the people involved.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Right. I'm gonna have to cut the hands for now because we have a lot to cover, guys. But let me take one guy and excuse me, I want to clarify this error because I noticed it's a recurring question I keep getting. One guy? Oh, yeah, one guy?
Yes, thanks, ma'am.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Yeah, no, I was just imagining as the conversation were actually being done in terms of in an exam setting where you are given you are given a scenario, but in the scenario you are not sure. Then what will be the best if someone say identify a person given the scenario as a CA, SA in business, but the person is a CA, SA in public. Then you say this person is a CA, SA in business. When that person is actually CA in public, how does the marker look at the solution? Do they say you're wrong or you're right in terms of answering technique?
Well, first of all, why are you coming into my exam room unsure? I must just ask that, like, why are you coming into the exam room unsure? Okay, so in a case like that, like avoid making such mistakes. Avoid making such mistakes, right? But it would be a difficult one. Yeah, it would be a really difficult one because practically it's wrong. It's wrong. Practically it's wrong. But I don't think in situations we haven't penalized like that. But practically speaking, it's actually wrong to get to that. Because I'm saying, you'll see now the when I continue with the slides, there's some areas that differ. So if you apply the steps, for instance, when dealing with a knockdown, if you apply the steps under 360, which is actually part of part 3, you may miss some steps. So yes, some things are similar, but some things are different. You may be in a situation whereby you're lucky, it's just a matter of dealing with, fundamental principles and threats. There, you are most likely to be dealing with the same situation. So you earn the marks there because it would be the same in either case. But I'd say just avoid finding yourself in a situation like that. It's actually quite simple, guys. Stick to your definition. Know and understand your definition. Apply it each and every time you do your question. You'll be fine. It comes with practice. Okay. Pumelele, last question I'm taking on this, and then we have to continue, guys. I've got 50 slides. We're not going to get through it. Pumelele?
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, this is me just giving people an idea.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with professional accountant in business, just look at the directors, look at the consultants inside the business, and maybe like a director. No, I did mention that. And then when maybe having to look at a professional accountant in public practice, you can have a look at like a trainee or like an auditor. It does actually specify in every scenario. If it's say an auditor or you are a newly appointed trainee at this company, then you'd know that this falls under public practice. And then when it says like your director, you'd know that this automatically falls under business, professional accounting in business.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes sense. That's how I look at it
boils
when
down
I'm
to the
reading a
tasks.
scenario.
What are the tasks of the person? Are the tasks related to the Big Four? It's as simple as that, guys. But I'm trusting that it will make sense over time. Just need to apply it and get yourself used to it. It will definitely make sense. I do have to move on. Someone said source ChatGPT. It's a pity this one. You won't take ChatGPT to the exam. It's a pity. Okay. All right. So these are the key definitions. We've gone through them. I hope you've highlighted them, right? Here are the fundamental principles. I'm not even going to look at each one individually. You've been looking at this since, I think, second year, if I'm not mistaken, but just a reminder of what the fundamental principles are. You need to know these, and they are as part of part one.
Sorry, Nosipo, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Can you see it now? Can you see my screen now? Yes, I see thumbs up.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. Okay, perfect. So these are the fundamental principles. Like I've said, you already know them, and I gauge that you understand what each one means, right? It's really not my focus for the day. The threats, I know that you already know them. I was going to make us just jot them down, each and every one of them, but I don't think we should waste time on that. Let's rather address the core issues that I think majority of the people in this call are struggling from. I said here NB being that don't get used to this thing of giving me one threat per issue that you've noted in the scenario. So more than one threat can be applicable to any given scenario. As a matter of fact, in 80% of the solutions I've seen, there's definitely more than one threat that's applicable. So please exhaust your options when you give me a response on your test or exam. This is actually an overall auditing principle. And I want you to start it now with test one. And as you practice, always get used to exhausting all options. Like think out of the box, think whatever possibility comes up in your mind, please can you note it down, because that will earn you marks. For instance, when we mark threats, we give half a mark for each threat that you give. And in many cases, you find that there's actually more than one threat that's applicable. I see a hand, but I'll attend to it once I'm done with this part of the slides. And then remember, the evaluation of threats and safeguards as well. The question will tell you if you need to give the evaluation of the threat and safeguards. If it hasn't said anything, please assume the full structure applies. But if the question has limited you and told you that you don't need to give the evaluation or significance of the threats and the safeguards, then you don't go to that extent, because that will be a time waster. And follow the prescribed framework, which I'm going to then later describe. I think, guys, the things I'm giving here are very applicable to CPC questions, but it's just also principles that will help you to pass auditing. In auditing, you need to understand your required, break it down, understand what it means, what is excluded, what is included, and you'll see that playing. You'll see this principle playing out, especially when you do the questions in relation to test one. You need to understand your scenario, but more so, your required is where it's actually happening. Okay, so I want us to then look at part two of the CPC, which is the professional accountant in business. And I was just checking my time. I see that we are pressed for time, but let's see. So these are the main sections that are covered in CPC part 2, right? I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. They are all important. You at least need to read through and know what's where in your standard. So what I used to do when I was studying is the day before, on the day before the exam, I would literally just go through my ISAs or my CPC or whatever material I was using, even with IFRS, to understand what's where. Like sometimes you highlight things and you forget, but just get into a habit of familiarizing yourself with this book, because sometimes you overload yourself with information and you force yourself to learn these things to the T. Whereas that weight could fall off if you just literally familiarize yourself with the standard and you know what's where. So I just want you guys to highlight these sections. I specifically want to bring your attention to section 260, which is responding to non-compliance with laws and regulations. Remember at the beginning of the lecture, I actually said some sections will be very similar for both part 2 and part 3. Here, section 260 is similar for both part 2 and part 3, but it's actually different. So I think today we'll go through 260 in detail, but then students must then go through 360 by themselves and identify the similarities versus the differences that are noted. So that's why I'm saying read the sections, understand them, and at least have an idea of what could differ and what could be the same. Okay, so I want us to go through section 260 in detail. Basically, what's happening here is the CPC is prescribing what should happen when a chartered accountant in business comes across a non-compliance with laws and regulations, which is what NOCLA stands for. So what are the prescriptions? So this, I think, was introduced about 4 or 5 years ago, after the VBS scandals and all of that, that there was actually nothing that was holding chartered accountants accountable for any non-compliance that was happening in their place of work. So this section addresses exactly that. So essentially what SAICA is saying here is there shouldn't be a situation whereby a CA is working and they are coming across non-compliance and they are doing nothing about it because they are not obliged to report to anyone. So how part 2 works is that it separates the steps to be taken for senior people versus non-senior people, and the definition of senior professional accountants in business is also within the standard. I think it speaks about, you know, directors, basically anyone with influence, significant influence, and a power to make decisions. So it separates between these two parties. So there's group 1, which is the senior execs, and then group 2, which is other. So in the other would be like maybe a financial manager who's working for a big company such as, I'm making an example, Telkom. That person is rightfully so a CA in business, but they don't have much influence on the decisions of the entity, versus a CFO of Telkom who could be in a much higher position and hence influence the decision making of the institution. So what are their steps? These are summarized, but you'll see, I think it's in if I just refer to my standard now, it's in ET 59. You'll see that, I mean, all of this that I'm going to summarize here is about 8 pages or so. So I would recommend that you go through it in the actual CPC, and then you come back to this and, you know, highlight the areas that you think are important. But the first thing is that you become aware of the NOCLA, right? While you conduct your business, you become aware that there's some sort of non-compliance. And then once you've noticed this, you obtain understanding of the matter to confirm that it actually is a non-compliance. So you investigate internally. This is when you are a senior professional accountant in business. And then number 3, important, you ensure that you followed all procedures and protocols that are in place within the business. So this is important because majority of big corporates or even small corporates have policies and procedures of how to deal with non-compliance. So you follow this first before doing anything else. And once you've exhausted that number 3, number 4, you then discuss the matter with the immediate superior. Now, imagine a case where this is a CFO that notices that there's some sort of a non-compliance happening within the entity. The immediate superior of a CFO would obviously be a CEO. If this person is a CEO, the immediate superior would actually be the board of directors. So that's how you sort of look at it. And then number 5, you then take further steps to communicate with those charged with governance. That's your board essentially. Number 6, you determine if disclosure to the external auditors is necessary. And in many cases, this may be necessary because, I mean, it's non-compliance with laws and regulations. And the auditor, as part of their procedures, they are obliged to actually assess whether there's non-compliance of any laws and regulations. So chances are, during the planning phase of the audit, the auditor will be alerted to this possible non-compliance or if actual non-compliance. Number 7, you assess whether further action is required. And you know, you consider such things such as the appropriateness of the response that you got from your superiors, you know, the circumstances of the actual matter, like how severe is this non-compliance. There's also something called the reasonable and informed third-party test. So if you read on, you understand that this means that you basically ask yourself, or you go through the process whereby you question whether if anyone else was a third party looking at the actions that I've taken as the senior professional accountant in business, would they be satisfied that I've done everything at my disposal to ensure that this gets exposed and reported? So you essentially imagine from a third party perspective whether the steps taken are actually reasonable. Okay, number 8, you conclude, and then number 9 is just other actions that may be applicable, such as reporting to the parent or to the parent entity if this is a subsidiary of a bigger group, or even resigning from your job, or reporting to a relevant to the relevant authority of the law, for example, if it's something that affects the competition commission. That's what it refers to. And then documentation is number 10. It's not required, however, it is encouraged. You'll see when you go through your self-study of section 360, which is now part 3, you'll see that actually there documentation is a requirement, and it's not just an encouragement. So that's basically the steps of how you should treat a situation whereby you are a senior a professional accountant in business who comes across a non-compliant within your place of work. And then the other part is just for other accountants, which is essentially the same steps. Besides that, it ends at number 4. Once you've informed your immediate superior, you've sort of handed over the matter to those with influence, and therefore there's not much obligation besides just high-level documentation, and there's no further much documentation. There's less steps when you are just an accountant and not really in a senior position. Okay. I don't know if there's any question. I know I was moving fast there because I actually realized we don't have much time. Are there any other questions? Are there questions specifically to what I've just described now? Ngali?
Ma'am, I just want to ask which requirement is on section 260 for step 2, which, like, I want to know the requirement number. I just can't find it on my standard.
The requirement number?
Yes, please.
It's 260. What do you mean? What do you mean requirement number?
Usually they'll be like R260 point something.
Yes, it's 260.1 all the way to the end of 260. To 260.27. If you have your book, it's ET59, the page.
ET59. Okay.
Yeah. 260.
Thank you.
Cool. Zolani?
Hello, ma'am. Thank you again. I just wanted to ask, so in questions, sometimes you see the required as like, for example, maybe 15 marks. How do you know you've written enough or you've written too little? Because sometimes you also, or most of the time, you're restrained due to time as well. So what is like a good, what would you say like is a good assessment or judge of time that you written enough?
Yeah, that's an exam technique question, but I'm happy to answer it now, right? For me, I think students gauge this. Number one, firstly, it's by experience. The more questions you do, the more you will establish. You'll be able to establish how much writing you should do for a 15-mark question. So practice, 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 so that it becomes second nature. It becomes part of your subconscious, and you already know how to gauge before you even you'll get to a point of not worrying about this because you've done enough question and you sort of have an idea. But for test 1, I would say that you need to consider the triggers in the scenario, right? And once you've considered the triggers in the scenario, then look at the mark allocation. That will guide you in terms of how much to write. Remember, I said earlier that the required is also important, and it plays a huge role because while you might be thinking that when reading the scenario, you might be thinking that, there's so much that applies to this question being asked, but you might get to the required only to find that out of the 4 things that I thought were going to be asked, they only want 1 or they only want 2. So it's actually a technique within auditing that students have to master if they want to pass auditing. And the best way I know how to master this is by doing enough questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Mohadi, I see you are alluding to the same question. Okay. I don't know if there's any other guys. If there's any major things that I'm forgetting from the chat, I can see that I'm losing track of what's happening in the chat, and that's because I'm trying to get through as much content as possible. Please just alert me, raise your hand if there's anything important that I'm forgetting. Okay. I want us to get to the exam technique very quickly. So the Code of Professional Conduct, Part 3. This is basically the setup of Part 3. I think in general, students don't struggle from Part 3 because it's the norm of how they understand auditing to be. And Part 3 in conjunction with Part 1, obviously, because it's normally tested together. So this is the setup of what Part 3 looks like. Obviously, look out for the differences. I've already mentioned and highlighted the differences in Section 360. Don't confuse the two. Okay, and then this professional conduct sorry, the CPC Part 4A and 4B. These are the items that are covered there. Please understand, read. I'd like to also bring your attention to this Section 600, which speaks of provision of non-assurance services to an audit client. There's very important information in these sections. Just read it and understand to what extent can an audit firm provide other non-assurance services. It's important to understand specifically in relation to a public interest entity. So please, can you just read this and make sure you understand? Well, I guess the assumption is that you already know what I'm talking about because you would have read. So we're not going to go through all of these in detail, but the expectation is that you should know them. Right, now, if anything, if you are not listening to me in all the other areas, at least listen to me for this slide, right? Here, students, I'm giving you a structure of how to answer CPC questions. Please, I appeal, please make sure whenever you come across a CPC question, follow the structure because it will allow you to maximize on marks. If you follow the structure, you can already see how many points there are here. There's like 7 points. You get much more marks. You maximize on your marks for CPC questions if you follow the structure. What is the structure? First, you identify the issue as per the scenario. So when you read the scenario, you identify what the issue is. What are we dealing with? Is it long association of clients, or are we dealing with an issue where the partner is familiar with the client? What is the actual issue? Identify it and then state it. And then tell me, what threat is it and to what fundamental principle? Remember here, I said you can have multiple threats and you can have multiple fundamental principles. Don't get used to this thing of just giving me one. No, think, sometimes I do agree, in some cases there may only be one, but think out of the box, exhaust your thinking to identify the threats and the fundamental principle. And then elaborate the reason. Why are you saying that this is a threat to what fundamental principle? Right? Why are you saying, what will this compromise? Right? And then, what are the implications of the threat? Will it bring a disrepute to the profession? Like, why is this a threat? Like, why is this, what are the implications if this thing actually continues, right? It's mostly in many cases, the answer is that it would bring disrepute to the profession. And then, what's the significance of the threat, right? Are there any safeguards that can be applied? And if there are, what are the safeguards? Right? By significance, I mean, is it high? Is it low? In many cases, it will be high because obviously for it to be a threat like that, I mean, surely it might be. I've hardly ever seen any medium or low threats, but they can be, right? And then I want to bring your attention to something that you may have seen in the questions if you were doing them. There is a big difference between a breach versus a threat. A threat is something that has not yet occurred. So it hasn't happened. And that's why we are safeguarding it, we are preventing and assessing it. So we can still put measures in place for this not to occur. However, a breach, there's nothing you can do. It's already done, right? You've already breached and you're already non-compliant. And you'll find that in many answers in the scenario, in many answers in the solution where it relates to a breach, there's not much marks for it because essentially what you do is you tell me the issue and you tell me the reason and then you tell me that it's a breach. So there's like 3 marks to it. So there's not much. So students need to identify and read scenario with the scenario with an understanding as to whether this is a threat or this is a breach. Okay. And then when the correct structure is applied, easy marks will be scored. I think I've already mentioned this. The important thing is to identify the issue when reading the scenario, and then link this to the applicable section in the CPC. And I say applicable section because sometimes the issue can be something outside of part 1. Say, for instance, a conflict of interest, right, or provision of non-assurance services by an assurance client, an assurance company. So identify the issue, and the issue will guide you in terms of where you are landing in the CPC. Practice to use your CPC when doing questions. I think I've already spoken about this. Be familiar with the book itself. Like you can't study without a flagged and highlighted book, because then you don't have to stress about knowing what's what. At least you have to know where about you'll find it, read it, and then apply it to your scenario. Okay. I can't emphasize this more. I think I already said majority of the concerns that you guys have will be sorted if you just practice more and give yourself time. Time yourself, master exam technique. And you started with test one, it becomes a habit. Every time you write a test, you know that you go through all questions and you do them under strict exam conditions. Okay. What type of questions could be asked as part of the CPC? Okay. Identify and discuss any ethical concerns in terms of SAICA professional code of conduct. Here, what you see is that they have the words any ethical concerns, but then they limit it by saying CPC. If they had left it like this and said any ethical concerns, this would also include business ethics. But luckily, they've limited it to SAICA Code of Professional Conduct. This is what I meant when I said the required will limit you and direct you in terms of how much you should write, in terms of which sections in the scenario to focus on, and so on and so forth. Something else is identify and discuss or describe any ethical concerns. Like I said, this one would then include business ethics as well. Discuss any actions he or she should take in her capacity of being a chartered accountant in South Africa. Obviously, chartered accountants are governed by the CPC, so it will definitely be applicable here. I've already spoken to the scoping out of items on the required. Just make sure that you understand this and you stick to what the required wants of you. Okay. Whew, there's hands for me. All right, Juliet, let's take your hand.
I just wanted to ask, in terms of the threats, you mentioned that we should not limit ourselves in terms of identifying the threats. So my question is, let's say, for example, I identify 3 threats: familiarity, self-interest threat, and intimidation threat. So do I start in terms of structuring the sentence, do I use like the same information, separating the threats, or is it possible to just include them in the same issue?
Okay, I think I sort of understand what you mean. You can do it in one of 2 ways, but I recommend the first one. Remember, the guiding or what will guide you here is what the issue actually is. If the issue is that, you know, the CFO is familiar with the audit partner, that's the issue. It doesn't change. It's a fact. It's something that's being said in your scenario. And then when you elaborate, you can then say that this then results in a self-interest threat to the fundamental principle of integrity or any other. But the issue itself must be what you see in the scenario as a fact. And then how you apply it is based on how you understand it. I don't know if I've answered your question. Is that clear, Juliet?
Yes. So just to get more clarity, right? So like you said that the audit partner is familiar with or has been auditing the firm for more than 10 years, for example. So that's the issue. So in terms of answering the threat, do I then finish like all those steps in terms of the reasons and then separate them?
Maybe not unless there's something that I'm not getting, but let me just quickly share. Let me just go back here. So you will definitely finish all these steps. So you identify the issue and state, like you've said now, then you come to the threats and you give me what threats are stated or are applicable based on the issue that you've identified. And then you tell me what fundamental principle is affected. So I'm saying here you can have more than one if the scenario allows. Even here you can have more than one if the scenario allows. And then the reason, just one reason is enough. The implications, just one is enough. And then the significance of the threat is obviously going to be one. So it's here only that you can do multiple, but everywhere else it's just one.
Oh yes, I'm answered. Thank you very much.
You answered. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So if one of them is wrong, I won't be penalized, right?
No, you won't. You're not gonna get the mark.
Okay. So I'll get a mark for, let's
The one
say,
that's correct.
What if 2 is correct? I'll get 2.
No, I think it's half a mark. It's half a mark for each threat that's mentioned. So it's normally half a mark for threats, half a mark for the fundamental principle.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Who's next? Lusanda.
Hi, can you hear
Hi,
me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I'm just gonna ask this again about the stating which part is applicable if on the CPC answering structure, if marks will be given for that, or if we need to indicate that. And also in terms of identifying the threats, is it limited to people? I don't know if it's the right time to ask this, but is it limited to people on the engagement? And also on those people that are on the engagement, is it limited to like a specific person that is maybe like dealing for like an IT, or like everyone on the engagement? Like I can say anyone on the engagement, or does it have to be like a specific person on that?
Okay, I think I get what you're asking. I think I get it. Okay, so the first question you were asking me is whether you'll get penalized if you mention the wrong parts.
Whether
Is
we
that
need
correct?
to state the part.
Okay, so I would guess like the safe thing is obviously to say they're a chartered accountant and therefore they must comply with the CPC. That's safe. But obviously you're at a level 2, right? So like you need to show your examiner that you are now at the phase of, understanding the differences between the two. So while I may mark you right if you just say CPC, but the expectation is that you understand, because this question, you could get one question that doesn't need the distinction, but it doesn't limit us from asking you about the distinction later on in the year. So I'm actually very worried that students are not comfortable with this, because it's actually an area that you need to get comfortable with, so that you avoid the confusion. Because if it's not clear, you'll forever be confused. But to answer your question, if it's like an overall CPC question, you can say that they are CSA, hence they must comply with the CPC. Okay. Have I answered you, Lusanda? Oh, you had a second question.
Yes, thank you.
You had a second question. Your second question was saying, it's actually quite important. You are asking me if the CPC will apply to the individual, e.g. a partner, or will the CPC apply to the audit team as a whole? Look, based on what we've described earlier, we said that the CPC is applicable to the individual who's a CA, but also to trainee accountants. So there's some threats and some threats will be applicable to the whole audit team, depending on how it's been described in the scenario. Let's say, for instance, there's an intimidation threat on one specific first-year audit trainee. That will obviously be only for them. But a threat such as, familiarity, that the audit firm has been auditing the company for 15 years, that is applicable to the whole firm. So you need to read the scenario well to understand, are we dealing with the specific individual versus are we dealing with the audit team? And all of that is still guided by whether or not they are still within the umbrella of the CPC. And the answer is usually yes. You understand?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Who am I taking next? That was Lusanda, right? Johannes, go ahead.
Okay, so
I'm struggling.
Questions on this final one.
Which
Sorry?
final one?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you much better now.
Okay. So my question is on the last bullet point, which is breach versus threat.
Yes.
So normally like you said, your threat would be let's take an audit example. You find that the client is offsetting in their income or expense accounts. So you tell the client, listen here, you're going to have to fix this. Otherwise, it's going to have to be, we're going to have to put it on the financials. So that's a threat we've identified, and the applicable safeguards is we've notified management, etc., etc. They fixed it, which is a current year error fixed in the current year. No documentation or no what do you call it? You don't need to put anything on the financials because we've picked it up and we fixed it. A breach would be, okay, they haven't paid SDL or they haven't paid pay as you earn for 2 years or 3 years. It's already happened, so it's a non-compliance with law or regulation, and the applicable safeguard would then be to disclose it.
I have one answer for you, and it's so simple for you to get this. I understand why you're confused, right? Remember, the threat or the breach is to the person who the CPC is applicable to. So it's to the partner, not to the client. The scenario you've given me is more worried about the client, but it's the holder or it's the partner that would have done the breach already. You understand what I mean?
Okay.
Yes.
So it's not.
It's not the client. It's the perspective that you have wrong. But it's a good point to raise. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we basically what you're saying is we're not putting anything on the financials for something that the partner did because it would have been a breach from someone who needs to comply with CPC with the SAICA CPC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do this. I'll bring an example with me tomorrow.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Okay, who's next? Charles, go ahead.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So my question is going to be on the I have two of them. The significance of the threat. So do we just say this threat is this threat is significant or is not significant enough, or we have to justify the reason why you say it
find
is
reason.
significant?
This is an area we're not normally too fussy about it, but at a CTA level 2, we expect that you at least give me a reason why you're saying it's significant. Like, why are you saying that this thing is so big? So you're always on the safer side if you can give me a reason. And your reason can literally be the same for all scenarios. And you can have a look at what the solutions have. But don't waste time now trying to crack your head as to what this reason is. But I would prefer that you include the reason because it's always the same. So why are you saying that the threat is significant?
Okay, thank you. Also, I also have a question in regards to, because some people are like from different universities, and I think they can relate to this. Is that with CPC they use it is the same framework, however, they kind of have a different structure in a way. Also, as an example, you have to mention your issue or number of issues depending on how big the question is. Where you have to state your issue first line. And then not first line, but I think second line. And then after that, you then link, or you can just name the threats that are indicated in the scenario. And then link those threats to as many fundamental principles as possible. I mean, you have to be in line with the scenario as well. And so when I went to some of the solutions after doing a question, it looks so different. And I don't really know exactly how to do this. I was actually thinking of doing a consultation about that, but I think I was just wondering if I could get assistance with regards to that.
But do you agree with me then that what you're telling me and what I've actually described here is the same? It's just that your difference is that you prefer to do one threat and then link to the fundamental principle, which then means that you will probably have two of these points. You'd have the first one, if you have, let's say the issue identifies two threats. You have number one, and then list one threat, and then multiple fundamental principles, and then you come to the second threat, and then list multiple fundamental. It's essentially the same thing, but I would recommend for you to stick to the structure that you're most comfortable with. But we are saying the same thing.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Charles, if you're not clear, please set up a consultation.
Okay, I'll do so. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Rahodile. Oh, guys, time. Yes. Yes. I can hear you, but you're so faint. You sound so faint.
Ma'am, may you please go to the last slide?
I am not I'm not hearing you well.
The last slide.
The last slide.
Yes, can you hear me now?
You're much better, yes. You want me to go to the last slide?
Yes, the last slide we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So the question I did, they said I must base my answers only on the CPC. But then in the question they discussed Companies Act. So I want to ask which one between the first two is like, I don't know how to ask this.
I know what you're asking. I would have to see the question number 1 to answer you fully. But for instance, when dealing with sections like Section 260, by default, that must have some sort of a law that is being not complied to, and that law could rightfully be CPC, be a Companies Act. So you may have those overlaps every now and then, depending on how the question is asked. But for your specific concern, I would actually recommend that you actually bring that to a consult so that we can have a look at it. But the overarching idea is that you need to stick to what they say. So when they say Code of Professional Conduct, also they've said here any ethical concerns. So by default, ethical concerns can't really include CPC, not unless we're talking about non-compliant. Sorry, it can't include Companies Act, not unless we're talking about some sort of non-compliance, of which is a requirement from the CPC that we need to comply to all laws and regulations. And you'll see this a lot as well when we do King. Because King also has the same requirement. It says that you need to comply to all laws and regulations. So sometimes students get confused as to, but they said they want corporate governance. But remember, as part of the King Code rules is that you need to actually comply to the laws and regulations. So those are the kind of overlaps that you may get here and there. But we would have to look at the actual question.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, when you discuss RI, will it ever happen?
Okay,
that
we're not there
discuss
yet. I'll hold it.
Okay, sorry.
Let's hold it. Yeah, we will ask your question when we get to RI, okay? When we get to APA.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, cool. If we can please make it quickly. Uko, is that a question?
Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
You spoke about breach versus threat, and that if we have a threat, then how I'm going to structure my answer by saying this poses a threat to this fundamental principle, and then go into the safeguards if there are any, right?
It's no longer a threat. You say it's a breach because this has been non-complied with. But I hear that this is an issue. I would need to explain this over a practical example because I heard the same question earlier. So let's convene tomorrow. I'll bring a practical example so I can show you guys. But essentially, the point I was trying to drive home is that with scenarios or issues where there's already a breach, right? You'll find that you actually find that there's less things to discuss because you only identify the issue and then you mention that it's a breach.
It's a breach of this fundamental principle.
Yes, it's a breach of a specific fundamental principle. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So instead of it being a threat, it's a breach to a fundamental principle.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but I'll bring a practical example tomorrow. Okay, Pilar Sunday.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi.
My question is more based on the multiple threats.
Yeah.
I feel like if, let's say, I state multiple threats, one threat to a fundamental principle, another threat to another fundamental principle, then the following steps, like the elaboration of the reason, the implication of the threat, then which threat am I actually speaking to? Because I have two sentences with threats and a fundamental principle, and the elaboration, which one am I picking?
If you're finding this confusing, then maybe follow whose approach was it? I forgot who it was. If you're finding it confusing, then follow the approach whereby you mention one threat and multiple fundamental principles, and then you elaborate the reason. But in most cases, I've actually seen that the reason is quite standard and it's quite similar to the issues that you've mentioned. So in many cases, you'll find that there's actually one reason which sums up what's actually going on in the scenario. And you'll see when we actually do a practical example. But if you find it confusing, simplify it for yourself. Do what works for you while you're still cautious of time.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything to make it simple, guys. At the end of the day, we recommend certain ways of doing things. If you have another way of doing it that makes it simpler for you, please go ahead and adapt that. Terence, is that a question?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, just wanted to ask in terms of non-compliance. For instance, if it's a private company and linking it to KIM 5, it's not really like a requirement, it's a recommended practice. But if like a question speaks about a public company, can I link KIM 5 as a non-compliance thing? Because for them, it's really a required, a requirement in terms of JSE if they are listed.
Yeah, if they are listed, KIM 5 is actually a requirement. They are required to comply to KIM 5, but we haven't gotten there yet. However, if they are not listed, then there's no much requirement. It's just they have to explain in detail why they haven't complied to that. Also, the question in the scenario will lay it out for you in terms of whether they've chosen or made the voluntary decision to comply to KIM 5 or not. But that should all be in the scenario. It's also a KIM 5 question, which maybe will be addressed in more detail later. I'm forced to move on, guys. Am I missing a question? Okay, I see that hand went down. Can I please continue and see how far we get? Because there's still a lot of slides to get through. And then at least if I can get to just discussing the business ethics. Okay, we have 30 minutes. All right. Now, business ethics. I want us to discuss this, and it's very important that students note this. Like I've already said, the question can sometimes ask you to give ethical considerations and not really limit you to Companies Act or I just want to switch off my video. It may not limit you to CPC, but just essentially ask you to evaluate the issue holistically and considering any sort of business ethics that may be involved. And this is a broad area. And because it's a broad area, there's some specific theories that are recommended by SAICA for students to know and understand the application thereof, even if it's just a matter of, reading it once and again once the night before the test. But you need to know these, and not just good for self and good for others. You need to know all of the other theories and understand them in detail, right? So what are business ethics? So business ethics refer to policies or practices that guide all decisions in the organization, whether it's with internal or external stakeholders. And when applied correctly, these will assist the organization to meet its operational goals. But not only that, it will also assist the organization to safeguard the reputation of the organization. I've listed here a list of theories. I may not go through each and every one of them right now, but you'll notice that a theory such as the stakeholder theory, this theory essentially deals with the fact that, as a business person or as a company, you need to consider the interest of all the individual stakeholders. So in a question, you would sort of have to identify who those stakeholders are and state how they are implicated in whatever scenario has been given. Shareholder theory as well, that you always need to be in a position where you bring something tangible to the shareholder. Agency theory as well, institutional theory. These are theories that you may have learned earlier on in second year. But again, they are applicable and they are still examinable. So I just want students to be comfortable with the fact that when asked a question, you can be able to at least identify and say, here, I think the legitimacy theory should be applied, or here is a resource-based view that should be applied. Note also that in these theories, it's also inclusive of corporate governance as defined by KIM 5. So when we talk of business ethics, when a question just talks of ethics, it also includes King, not unless it's actually said that you don't need to consider any King recommendations. So these are again the ethical foundations that you may have learned in second year, like I've said, your Ubuntu's, utilitarian, all of these, you just need to have them handy, know what they're about, so that when the question comes, you have to apply. Remember, the question will never be the same. So you must be able to read in the scenario and sort of gauge what the issue is, and then pull out these theories and say, okay, here I'm going to use the Ubuntu or fairness judgment or something like that. It's just knowing what it is so that you can identify when it's triggered within a scenario. Okay, so here's my exam technique when it gets to business ethics. Number one, understand all the theories, non-negotiable. You need to know what they are. You need to read the required carefully to understand the extent in which you should be answering. Are they asking for ethical considerations, including or excluding King? So all of this will be stipulated in your required, like I've been saying. So let the triggers in the scenario and the mark allocation on the required guide you in terms of how far you should go in your answering. If I'm being really honest, this is one area where students struggle. I don't know why. Maybe I know why the students struggle mostly with this. It's because it's difficult to understand which theory to download. But you'll see that when you actually go through the scenario, we make sure to accommodate as many theories that could possibly be applicable. So that means that in your thinking, as you go through the scenario, also exhaust your thinking to the core. I've also been saying this quite a lot. You need to exhaust your thinking. Think and make notes while you read the scenario. Which theories could be applicable? What could be affected? And when you get into that habit, it will make sure that when it gets to marks, you know how to generate marks. Always have a full picture view of what is going on. Do not look at issues in isolation. So when don't limit your thinking to one paragraph. Always take a stance of like a helicopter view and look at the scenario from a helicopter view to understand what actually is the issue here. Are we dealing with corruption from management? Are we dealing with stakeholders not being taken into account? That view will help you to identify the theories. And then once you've done that, you then drill down to the actual core or the actual specific pillars in the scenario and you elaborate yourself. That view is also important. So I'm not saying the isolated individualistic view within the scenario is not important. It's also important, but take some time and look at the full view of the scenario. I normally say that the full view or the helicopter view of your scenario will be what your conclusion is. So if it means that after reading the scenario, you know what the conclusion in the scenario is, that's your full view. You will know that here we are dealing with an issue whereby the some stakeholders that are not taken into account, or here we are dealing with a fraud issue or anything of that sort. And then the other trick that students need to remember when dealing with business ethics is consider all the parties involved in the scenario and how they are affected. Identify these parties, highlight them, whatever it is, flag. And by parties, it could be an individual person, it could be companies, it could be different stakeholders. But make sure you identify these parties and sort of gauge what the implications or how are they affected as described in the scenario. Identify the major theories involved and give points for each, even if they seem repetitive. So you'll see this a lot, right? You'll see, for instance, I already know that, for instance, the King Code has now, King 5 has now adapted a whole lot of theories from like the stakeholder view theory. So you might find that sometimes the points that you are mentioning, they're overlapping. I'm saying, write them, even if it seems as if you are repeating the same thing, write them. The fact that you are describing the issue from a different theoretical principle is enough. And that's why when you read the scenario, you even see sometimes it seems like a repetition, but the point of view is different. That's why then I'm saying when you answer, don't limit yourself to one theory per se. Identify all theories that could possibly be involved and list the issues or implications, even if it starts to sound like, sometimes you're saying something that's the same. And then lastly, always give a conclusion. Like I've said, the conclusion part links very well with having that whole full picture view, because here you'll conclude that actually we have an issue here and, ex-director hasn't treated employees the right way or whatever it is. So just get into the habit of always looking at the full view. Okay, before I go into the APA, are there any questions? I haven't looked at the chat for the longest of times, but are there any questions that with regards to the business ethics? Are you guys clear? Are we good? Thumbs up. Campus forgets. Hey, you see, one thing about auditing, we can tell when students have been cramming memos and they are bringing their theory dumping from memos. Please avoid this at all costs. Try and understand and apply yourself. If you studied and you practice it going forward, you'll be able to pass auditing. Okay. All right, let's move on then to the Auditing Profession Act. This one is quite simple and straightforward. And I know that from undergrad and even CCA level 1, there's a lot of emphasis on, the Auditing Profession Act, more specifically the reportable irregularities. Okay, so this is the setup of what the Act looks like, right? Like I've been saying, just read through and understand what is involved in here. And obviously, reading this will also help you to know which parties should I be looking to apply the Auditing Professions Act to. So you already know that fundamentals that this person must be a CA, and also now for them to be bound by the APA, they must be a registered auditor. Note that the APA is actually an act, so the statutory implications for non-compliance with the act. Okay, and then if you've been listening to the news, or if you are you know what's going on within the field, you also know that now ACCA, people who are training through ACCA can now qualify as registered auditors. So I would like to draw your attention to that. Just have a look and understand what that journey looks like. Just so you know that it's no longer just CAs, the ACCA candidates can also now qualify to register as auditors. Okay. So here, the most important thing that I want to draw your attention to is just the duty to report irregularities. And you already know this, and I don't want to spend much time in it, but I want to highlight the exam technique. So high level, there's a duty for registered auditors to report reportable irregularities once they've applied the definition of RIs and they're comfortable that there is an RI. There's duties that are involved as prescribed by the Act, and that is essentially reporting the matter to IRBA and discussing the issue with management. However, the most important thing is that the definition should be met, which you now know and are comfortable with. So from an exam technique perspective, remember this is CTA level 2, just before board exam. So you won't, chances of you getting an APA question that just says consider, okay, that's odd. If anything, that you will never get a question that straight out asks you to consider whether the action is an RI or not. However, RIs will now be embedded in bigger questions, right? So you must look out when you read and you see something that almost seems to be a non-compliance of a law, already start thinking about APA and the implications as it relates to RIs, because it will never be asked directly. So read your scenario, and you're required carefully to understand what is exactly being examined. And sometimes if you don't make enough notes when you read the scenario, you might forget that you've actually identified an RI. So you'll find that it's embedded or hidden somewhere. Understanding the roles involved will also help students to know whether APA is applicable or not. The roles is important. I've already said that you know that for APA, you must be a registered auditor. So if it's just a CA and they come across some form of non-compliance, then chances are they'll end up in the CPC section 260 or 360, depending on where they're practicing. However, if they are a registered auditor, then certainly there might be a duty to report an RI. and then look out for statutory considerations as APA is the law, like I've already said. So just like Companies Act may be phrased to sound, the required may be phrased to look out for statutory requirements, the same is applicable here because it's a law. You could be asked to, give the statutory implications. Okay. Any questions? There's a question. Lebogang? Lebogang, is that a question? Lebogang, is that a question? Okay, I'll skip that. All right, and then we're coming to ISO 240. Yeah.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you now. I called you earlier and you didn't respond, so I thought it was a legacy hand. Is that a question?
No, it was. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, how do you differentiate the triggers to either choose Section 360 or the reputable irregularity considerations? Because both deal with non-compliance issues, but then there's always a trigger to whether you to use the CPC or the one in the APA Act, ma'am. How do you differentiate? Like, what's really the difference in between? Because they look the same. Like, if you're treating an issue that deals with non-compliance, it's almost the same.
Yeah.
It's almost the same. But what's the actual difference?
Okay. I need us to go through this together. That's why I switched on my video. Okay. For an RA, who has the duty to report an RA? RI, sorry.
RI, ma'am. It's an RI is anyone who's registered.
Registered auditor.
Someone who's a registered auditor.
Okay. And for CPC, who must comply with the CPC?
Both CAs in business or public practice, but it mostly applies to CA in business.
Okay. So can you have a situation whereby an individual who's a CA is bound by the CPC but not bound by the APA?
Yes, you can.
Yes,
which is
right?
If you have to be a registered auditor, so that differentiates between the public practice and the business.
Exactly. So when you're faced with a scenario with a situation in a scenario where there's a non-compliance, you need to consider the person involved. Is the person a CA and registered auditor? What role are they playing? Or are they just a CA? So obviously, for there to be a duty to report to IRBA, you need to be a registered auditor. Hope that makes sense, Lebogang. Okay. All right. Ngali, is that a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I saying your name correctly?
Ngali, yes, ma'am.
Ngali, okay, cool.
Yes. I just want to ask, would it then be further to say that with the RI, the registered auditor must be acting in the capacity of the auditor of the client, or even if they're not? I don't know if that makes sense.
You're 100% correct. You're 100% correct. Chances are they'll come across a non-compliance by virtue of them being an auditor. There's no other practical way of them coming across the information. If they are not coming across the information in their capacity as the audit partner, chances are they'll end up being in the CPC. You understand? Because the APA only becomes applicable once that relationship is established between client and audit partner. If that relationship is not there, the obligation to report is there, but from a CPC perspective. Cool. Toti-san?
Yes, I have a question. I've seen that in question papers, they would say maybe discuss in detail any issues that you have in terms of corporate governance. So I would like to ask, is the APA included in corporate governance? Because I know it's King 4, Companies Act, and CPC.
What
So I
world
wanted
are
to
you
ask
living
if
in? What's King 4? What world are
It's
you
King
living
5, sorry.
corporate governance is usually just king. Corporate governance is usually just king. It's the statutory things that include Companies Act and all of that. However, don't forget, there's always that overlap because the King Code says that we need to comply with all laws and regulations. It could be included. So the legal stuff could still come in because as part of the requirements of King is that we need to be compliant with all laws and regulations. So you must be driven by the scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Tumelo?
Yes, one quick question just to tie this differentiation as well. So from scenarios, I've seen that if they mention ethical considerations, that's more likely under CPC. And if it's a statutory consideration, that's when we delve more into the APA sections and the Companies Act as well. And if they say legal and ethical, then it can be APA as well as King 5. Is that safe to assume?
You're 100% correct, but it's coming up in the next few slides, but that's 100% correct. I'll in the next slides, I'll explain why that is. Statutory is statutory and legality is the same thing. So that's why I was highlighting that the APA is actually a law. CPC is a conduct, so it's like an ethics thing. It's not really a law. Companies Act is a law. King 4 is not really a law, but you could be required to comply with it if you're listed. But so it's those type of distinctions that actually that we use to to trap you guys on the required.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Cool. Rahodile. Okay, before you come to Rahodile, I saw an interesting question in the chat. NOCLA is reported to whom? It's definitely SAICA because it's under the CPC. But it's more than the reporting. It's actually following the steps of the NOCLA. More than the reporting. Okay. Okay, Rahodile.
Ma'am, may you please repeat the link between the roles of the individual 360, 260, and APA?
Okay. I'm
Thank
saying
you.
it's important to understand. Oh yes, it's important to understand who's the individual that is faced with this non-compliance. If the individual is a CA and not a registered auditor, there's no ways that the APA could be applicable to them. So they don't have to report a reportable irregularity. So it ends with just CPC regulation in terms of 260. However, if the individual is a registered auditor and they are auditing the client, so they are coming across as non-compliant by virtue of them being the auditor, then in that case, they will have to report the RI. They will be obliged to adhere to the APA. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. If it's a trainee that comes across the RI, are they considered RAs? Okay, cool. Obviously, on the ground, right, what actually happens is that, first of all, you don't trust first years to come up with non-compliances. It's usually not as deep as they make it seem. But if it does happen that the trainee notices the non-compliance, obviously by the structures that have been laid within the audit team, that non-compliance will end up being the responsibility of the partner because the partner is the one that is individually and sometimes a firm obliged by or required to comply with the APA. Does that make sense? I don't know who asked the questions. Okay. All right, let's see if I have more time to go through the questions on the chat, but I want to rather continue with the rest of the slides. Okay, ISA 240. So this is the only ISA that we're actually doing as part of the test one prep. And the reason why we're doing this ISA is because it actually addresses the fraud issue. And you'll see in many cases where ethics are involved, it's actually because the underlying is this fraud. So ISA 240 actually outlays the conduct of the auditor by specifically stipulating what are the roles and responsibilities of the auditor versus what is the roles and responsibility of management within the client. Okay, So the existence of fraud will affect the auditor's assessment of the risk of material misstatement, both at financial statement level and at assertion level. If this hasn't started making sense yet, just stick around. You'll see it more in the next few weeks. Fraud considerations are not a standalone exercise, but are integrated throughout the audit process. So that's what this revised ISA 240 actually emphasizes. It actually says, if you can just remember the first slide that we're looking at, I just can't go to it now because it will waste our time. That first slide where we were describing the audit process. What this ISA is actually saying is the considerations for fraud should not only be limited when we start to plan the audit. We should always have professional skepticism throughout the audit process so that we are woke and we can identify areas that could potentially be fraudulent areas. So that's why here all these different parts of the audit are mentioned. And it is the primary responsibility of management to prevent and detect fraud. The auditor has nothing to do with the prevention and detection of the fraud. However, the auditor's responsibility is to always keep a high level of professional skepticism throughout the audit process so that they are able to identify. And the ISA goes on to tell us how the auditor should then identify or exercise this professional skepticism. So the auditor should incorporate an element of unpredictability in their testing. There should be specific procedures that deal with management override controls, such as testing of journal entries, reviewing of high risk areas such as any accounting estimates or any areas that involve a high level of judgment, such as bonuses. So because there's a need to be professionally to exercise professional skepticism, these are the areas that the auditor needs to focus on. And I just want to bring to your attention that there's already a presumption that there's a risk of material misstatement due to fraud with revenue. So you can just always remember this, that where there's revenue involved, the standard says that you must assume that there's some sort of fraud, obviously because management is always inclined to overstate revenues and understate expenses. So essentially what this ISA is saying is look out for fraud as an auditor. There's always going to be a reason for you to keep your eyes open throughout the audit process. Okay. Exam technique in terms of ISA 240. This, again, just like the APA, is likely to be integrated among questions. And that's why we're doing it here, because it's likely to be integrated with ethics and all of that, because, I'm sure you already know that CPC addresses the issue of fraud. And, from a Companies Act perspective, there's repercussions for fraudulent activity and so on and so forth. And I won't mention APA that we've just gone through now. So this ISA becomes important because it can easily be integrated with the whole subject matter that we're looking at now. So students need to read the standard together with the appendices for more elaborate examples of what we should be doing as an auditor. So like I've been saying, you need to go through ISA 240, highlight it for yourself, look at the examples of, the prescriptions for the auditor in terms of responding to fraud. What should the auditor be doing to respond to fraud throughout the audit process? We've already mentioned that there's a difference between what management has to do in relation to the prevention and detection of fraud, as well as what the auditor needs to do. Exercise professional skepticism all the way through, and obviously because there's a presumption that revenue has got a high ROM in relation to fraud, we already know that there will be other triggers such as IFRS 15 as well as internal controls. And I'm mentioning this here, but it could also affect your other sections that you are yet to do for the year, such as later on when you do test 3 and stuff like that. So just remember the standard. It can easily be integrated with many of your other sections that are yet to come. Okay, any questions? Okay, I want to spare a few minutes to respond to the chats, but let's do Companies Act, and hopefully we'll get to do if you guys can just borrow me 5 minutes of your time after 8, I promise you I'll be done by 8:05. I just want us to go through the exam technique for Companies Act and King. I think that's important. Okay, so for Companies Act, There's not much to say there, guys, besides these are the main sections that you need to know off by head. I'm joking, not off by head, but you need to be familiar with them because chances are you'll get asked these questions. I'm not saying the other sections are not examinable, they certainly are, but this is where I think the meat is, and you need to be familiar with this. You need to do questions that involve these questions, these sections, so that you establish a way of responding to them. I also just want to highlight, I think you may have seen this already, that there's a lot of overlaps between the ethics part, but here I'm talking about the overlaps between Companies Act and King. Please note these for yourself and know where the overlaps are and what are the differences between what King says versus what Companies Act say. I'm talking about areas such as the role of the board, the director's conduct, the appointment of auditors, committees, reporting, etc. By the etc, I mean there could be other areas that I haven't noted here. But when you read and you study your material, just note these areas because we could easily trick you with that. There could be, that one requirement that's different between the two that you would have to note. Don't just read for understanding, but critically analyze and evaluate how the Companies Act differs from King and what the implications would be from an APA perspective, CPC, and so on and so forth. I like what we were doing just now, just with regards to the question as to, who would be required to adhere to APA versus CPC. So that's the kind of critical thinking I'm talking about that will enable you to, prepare yourself well enough for the test and other exams that are yet to come. Okay. And then the famous one, I saved the best for last because I know that this is a new standard. Not a new standard, but a new code. The previous one was King 4. You guys would be the first group that gets tested on King 4. King 5. So obviously you need to look out for the things that are different between King 4 and King 5 and understand overall what is the difference between the two. What is now the direction of the new code versus the last one. And the first thing you'll note is the fact that right now King 5 has been reduced to 13 principles as opposed to 17. So it's much smaller principles. Not that the issues that were addressed in the previous King are not included. No, they've just summarized some of them, and they've included them in some already existing sections. I think there's a bit of an error there. I'll fix it. But principle 5 and 6 look to be. Oh no, they're not the same. I thought there was an error. But yeah, so the 13 principles are now within King 5, and then as opposed to 17 in the previous code. What are the main areas that could be different? I think that the key thing that you'll see across, reading. I know you will never get to a position of reading both and understand, but because I've had the pleasure of teaching on both, I understand that the direction has sort of switched, and now King wants companies to actually report on an outcome based. So I think from a video I've watched earlier in the year, they were actually saying that the issue with King has always been that, it's all in paper, but we never really see what the impact of the application is. I'll make an example. Things such as, CSR projects, corporate social responsibility. Companies would list in their integrated reports and say that, yeah, these are the CSR projects that we've done, but the actual impact of how many lives have been impacted, how many jobs have been created, and how many businesses have been uplifted was left unattended, and there's no way of reporting that. So now the code is more outcome based because the emphasis is on showing and elaborating how the application of the code has actually assisted. So there's also a high focus on stakeholder inclusivity in a very sustainable manner. You already know, if you listen to the news, you'll know that there's a huge emphasis globally to just have a focus on sustainable development goals and ensure that our countries, our companies adhere to practices that will advance the meeting of those goals. So that's the underlying factor. I'm not going to go through each and everything here. I expect that you guys will go through this, and as a matter of fact, it's exactly the same as what you would have already had in your learning material. So here I just highlight the major things that are different and what is being emphasized. So again, like I've been saying, I would say that go through the King Code. It's not actually a lot. The previous King 4 was a lot, but this one is not a lot at all. So go through it, highlight the areas and note where the differences are, so that when the question comes, you are able to at least refer to your standard and understand what needs to be answered of you. Okay, I'm going to go quickly through the exam technique for this. Okay, so for Companies Act and King 5, these are the types of questions that you can expect, right? You can expect to be asked to discuss the concerns because, you know, there would have been scenarios, there would have been issues in the scenario whereby there's clear non-compliance with Companies Act or King. And when you do these discussions, please, the structure, I'm now looking at this point here, the structure is to state the principle, though there's no mark for this, but it allows you to think clearly. So you state the principle and then you apply. So you say, for instance, the board, there's not enough members in the audit committee. That's the application. But the principle would be that the King requires that there are a minimum of 3 members in the committee. So you first state the principle and then you apply the principle. Some students prefer to do this in one sentence. I just say, you know, do what you're comfortable with, but make sure that whatever you do, you ensure that it allows your thinking to flow well, and you're not going to miss, you know, the key elements that I'm looking for when I do the marking. So make sure that when you apply yourself in number 2 here, you make sure that I can see that you are saying to me that there's a concern because something has been breached. Make sure that it's stated in the negative, that I can, from reading your sentence, I can tell that you are saying there's an issue here because something has not been met. And don't make it sound positive. It's negative already because there's a breach. So just ensure that your wording has noted that. With regards to making reference to the specific principle or section, I think I've mentioned this earlier. Someone asked it. My preference is that at CTA level, at least you should know what principle we are dealing with King 4. And there's some Companies Act sections where, like, you cannot know Section 76 of the Companies Act. So there I expect you to mention them. If it does happen that you forget these, then the least you can then say is according to the Companies Act or according to King 5. But try by all means to understand. And that's why I'm then emphasizing the flagging, because if you flag your standard, then it will be very easy for you to quote the specific section or the specific principle that is applicable in your response. Okay, and then the other thing is just, yeah, this one we've already discussed. If a question says identify and discuss the statutory and the corporate governance, here it means that statutory is Companies Act and corporate governance is King. So here you discuss both. If the question says discuss concerns relating to King, that's obvious. It's only referring to King 5. Or it says to corporate governance, then you know that you're only dealing with King. If the question says discuss contraventions of the Companies Act, obvious again, or discuss the legality or statutory, then you know that we are dealing with the law here. So it can only be Companies Act and not King. So just because they don't mention something doesn't necessarily mean it isn't there. For instance, students have got this tendency of, you know, assuming that because things are not mentioned in the scenario, you know, it's an issue. So if nothing is said, for example, if the scenario says nothing about the Social and Ethics Committee, it doesn't automatically assume that the committee is not there. It could be that it's not the area that wants to be tested. So you can't go and say, yeah, because the scenario doesn't mention anything about ethics and social committee, then it means that it's not there and therefore it's non-compliant with King. So you need to be driven by the triggers that have been given in the scenario. So there needs to be something that makes you believe that so the fact that something is not mentioned is of substance for you to include in your response. Do not forget to quote the specific session, like I've said. If you're unsure, revert to saying according to, but like avoid. mindful of mark allocations. So mark allocations will always tell you how far to go in a question. Okay. Thank you guys so much. I did ask for 5 minutes and you've given me. I'm happy to take questions. Maybe in the next minute or two, I can take questions. I see there's quite a few hands. Pumelelo. Pumelelo, is that a question? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. Hi, Nosipo.
Hi.
On your last point, you said you're basically saying we should assume something is true unless we find it false.
Not in your words per se, because your words are also now confusing me. So I'm saying that if I haven't alluded to something in the scenario, there's no reason for you to assume whether that it's true or it's false. So perfect example is if I haven't mentioned anything to do with the social and ethics committee, the fact that I haven't mentioned it in the scenario doesn't mean that it's not there. Therefore, you can't assume that there's an automatic non-compliance with King because I haven't mentioned anything to do with the social and ethics committee. Please stick to the triggers that are already identified in the scenario. There's a reason why we give you those triggers.
Sure. Thank you on that one. Then quick, two very quick ones. The flagging, right? This might not be relevant to this, but maybe you can help. The cross-referencing on the flagging. What's the rule on that?
What's cross-referencing? What does that mean?
Exactly. That's exactly the question I'm actually asking. Because for example, if I want to say appointment of auditors or something, and I know there's an overlap in Companies Act and there's an overlap in somewhere else, King, for example, then am I allowed to put that on the flag?
Or... No, I wouldn't guess so. The overlaps are for you to know. Okay. The overlaps are for you to know. You keep a list of the overlaps and you know that there's an overlap of appointment of directors between King and whatever. You can't write it in the standard because that would be cheating in a way.
Okay, no, I just saw something about cross-referencing. So that's actually why I was asking, am I allowed to say, let's say on my section 76 flag, am I allowed to say C70 or 102, which is not necessarily on that page, you know what I mean? But just so that I, or is that cheating? Or is that crib notes? That's actually what I was asking.
Let me find out. But then how I understand it is if someone wants to check your standard, right? Yeah. And for instance, you flagged principle 13 and you said P13. When I open that, I should see P13. Yeah. Nothing else. That's how I understand it. But let me find out for you and give you the exact, maybe the rules have changed. But in my opinion, honestly, you should know the overlaps. You shouldn't have to be reminded through your flaggings.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Anivuyi.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to ask on King 4, we're having the sector supplements. So on King 5, there's no longer that chapter that is relevant because I tried to sector supplement that is dealing with public entities.
No, I don't think it's there. Hey, so you'll see one of the things that they've done is they've actually simplified it and made it straightforward such that when I read Principle 8, I should be able to apply Principle 8 for a big company, for a state-owned company, for an SME. That's how I understand it, and you'll see it in the list of differences. So there's no longer like segments or specific sectors that need to be noted because they believe that it's actually quite simple, that it can be applied universally.
Oh, okay, thank you. Because I wanted to ask a question that was relevant that I saw it in last year's SAP that was talking about that one.
Yeah, we're going to have that problem a lot, but yeah, you'll get used to. I'm not sure if you'll have enough King 5 questions, honestly, but yeah, we'll try and ask it more so that students get familiar.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Ndwandwe?
Hi, Nosipo. I have a question. With regards to the King 5 printings, is it available on my UNISA to say which specific parts we should print out? Are we printing out the whole thing?
I think I saw something uploaded on my UNISA. I think you're printing out the whole thing because that's the whole King 5, right? Were you confused? Were you confused?
Yeah, because I went on the, what is it? The Institute, is it the director's website? And
IODSA.
I tried to find out as to which specific
No, I saw something
handbooks.
uploaded. I saw something
Okay,
uploaded
I'll
on
have
my
a
UNISA.
look.
Please stick to the one that's uploaded. I think it was an announcement. I can't remember where I saw it, but I can tell you tomorrow where I saw it. But I saw something on my UNISA.
Okay, and then I also wanted to make like a what I've observed over the years with the the standards and the legislation and stuff. I feel like the King Code, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the foundation of it comes from the Companies Act and comes from the standards, the auditing standards. So I don't know. I think you asked a question about differentiating between the two. I sort of kind of struggle to differentiate from the two because when I'm studying, I always go back to see what is the foundation of that particular principle or the foundation of the King Code. And I feel like everything comes from the Companies Act, and it comes from the APA Act, and it comes from the other statutory requirements. So I don't know, maybe I'm approaching it from the wrong point of view.
Yeah, that's a fair observation. However, all I'm saying is that you should be able to tell me if there's a section that regulates the appointment of board members or the appointment of the audit team.
Okay.
If that is prescribed in the Companies Act versus King, you should be able to tell and pinpoint that yes, it is prescribed across different avenues, and this is what it says. So that's why I'm emphasizing on the overlaps. It's important for you to know that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bongegile.
Hi, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Bongegile.
Hello. Can you hear me, ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you now.
Oh,
yes, I can hear you now.
So I wanted to ask with regards to King 5, the link that was sent on my UNISA, it has 4 parts. So I wanted to ask if is it allowed whether to just print the code instead of printing the whole 4 thing, all of them.
I think this is what Ms. Ndando was also asking. Let me actually find out for you, ne?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Kamukelo.
I just wanted to ask, and maybe it's a similar question as to the other people that asked it. But I just wanted to know if you have the King 4, right? And I'm looking at the King 5, and I'm seeing it's really just, as you said, summarized King 4, and certain things are omitted. Is it okay just to continue off with my King 4?
It's not okay. You get so confused. It's not okay. Please familiarize yourself with King 5. Even I had to go through the whole code to update my material.
Okay.
So, so everything, so like, that's a bad mentality to have. We move, change, adapt to change.
But now you have to buy like a new book.
No, that's why you don't have to buy. That's why it's on my UNISA, so you can just print and have it.
So is this applicable for all because now auditing is saying that we can print out King 5, and then in accounting we can't print out IFRS 18. So it's just a misalignment.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that treatment. So we got communication from SAICA that we can print out and bring printed version of King 5. So I don't know how they're treating the IS 18 thing. But just find out from the accounting lecturers. But adapt or die, girl.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Tumelo, last hand.
Yeah, okay. On that note of adapting or dying, since you've now said King 5 is focused on results and you specifically said outcomes rather than processes, right? So, kind of a high level example. sustainable value creation is principle 3, I believe, in King 5. So if a board fails to achieve that, do they fail alone as a legal breach of their duty to act with care and skill under Section 76 in the Companies Act as well? And so as auditors, would this become an RI for breach of fiduciary duty?
I'm
Even if
confused.
is King
is
yes?
King a legal requirement?
No, it's not.
Yes. So then I answered.
Okay.
Yes. So because it's not a legal requirement, it wouldn't really be a breach of anything. Remember, it says apply or explain why you can't. Now, what's changed is that even King says the explanation must be clear. I want to see the steps that you've taken for you not to be able to, apply yourself. So maybe they might need to explain more in terms of how they couldn't create that shareholder value. However, it's still not non-compliance because they're not required to, not unless they're a JSE listed entity.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Thanks.
Yes. Cool. Okay. Nduduzi. Nduduzi, your hand is up. Okay. I'll skip Nduduzi because I can't hear. Terence, last hand.
I think you already answered because I was just going to ask about the same thing about JSE listed companies. If it's then listed, then isn't that also like a legal requirement for the?
Yeah, it's a JSE listing requirement.
Thank you.
Cool. Mbele.
Wait, am I audible? Evening, everyone. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, just a quick question. Are we required to consider ISA 250, which is the consideration for NOPLA for the upcoming test, or we don't do it totally?
No, not from an ISA perspective, but from a 260 perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Section 260 of the APA.
Okay, thank you.
And 360, rightfully so.
Sure.
Okay. Mbele, is that another question?
No.
Oh, that's you. Okay, Terence, is that another question?
Oh, sorry, I just forgot to take my hand out.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Guys, thank you so much. The class has ended. I will try and find out my best with regards to the question. Tomorrow we are doing practical questions only. So please go through the slides again, go through the structures. I'll give you guys time to go through it during the lecture. Let's be practical tomorrow. So come ready. If you can do the question before, I would highly recommend so that it speeds up the process. But we'll take 2-minute, 3-minute breaks just for you guys to be able to apply the structures that we've learned today. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you all back tomorrow again in preparation for test 1. Have a lovely evening. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Thank
you. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Tomorrow, same time. Bye.
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 Okay, just want to check and are the slides uploaded already?
Yes, slides are already uploaded.
And additional resources?
Additional resources.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
More as